Hello again, and welcome to Herd Immunity News. I'm Marcus Botzer. Today, we have the great pleasure in once again welcoming Giovanni Di Stefano, better known as the Devil's Advocate. We've invited Giovanni on because he has some incredible insight into this ongoing situation in Israel and with the Palestinians. But before we go any further, let me just say, Giovanni, come stai, sir?
Io sto bene, sono appena tornato da Rome. I've just come back from Rome, and I was in Monaco for less than 1 hour to sign some papers. What those papers are, well, if anybody wants to know, they have to buy my book.
Well, we will leave all the links to your great material and literature after this interview that we have with you today. Now, you do have some direct insight into the situation because you know some of the people involved. For the benefit of our viewers and listeners, when it comes to Israel and Palestine in the conflict, where are your connections to the situation? And give us your thoughts, please.
Okay, Marcus. First of all, we need to have a few caveats and a few prerequisites. Number one, I, Giovanni Di Stefano, and my political party and the Republic of Italy repudiate war. We repudiate violence, and I personally and my party and Italy repudiates any form of violence to achieve a political aim. So that's number one. So I'm against any form of that. Doesn't matter who it is, from the Israelis, the Palestinians, the English, the French, the Turk. It doesn't matter. We repudiate any form of that. That's number one. Number two, before anyone accuses me of anti-Semitism or anything like that, during the Second World War in our village, my great-grandfather saved a Jewish woman, a young girl, put her in a big oak chest with wheat and had a straw. So when the Germans came, they didn't find her. What then happened was that they shot his daughter. So I don't want to, and she gave to my great-grandfather the Jewish star, which we still have. It's gone down from generation to generation to my grandmother, to my mother, and my mother will pass it to me, when in 1,000 years she passes away. So we are not under any we lost a life to save a life. That's number two. Number three, I know the founders of Hamas. I have offered advice to them before in the past. Also Hezbollah, also the FARC rebels, a number of organizations that are not welcome, have used me to achieve a political solution as opposed to a violent solution there. So I'm, take no comments from anybody on that there. Without people like me, you will just have bloodshed all the time there. In the question of Hamas, you need to remember that the history of Hamas was formed in the mid-80s, 87, I think, by clerics, Abdul Rantisi and Ahmed Yassin. I know both of them. I also knew very, 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 very well Yesser Arafat, the Palestinian PLO. And the reason I knew of him was because he had his headquarters in Tunis, which Tunis allowed there, and Belgrade, Serbia, recognized the PLO as a form of an observer country status there. So he came to Belgrade, and I've spoken to him, I exchanged letters with him. Under no circumstances, he was looking, and not many people know this, he was looking for a solution to recognize Israel via a referendum of his people there. Now, let me tell you the history of that land so that people understand clearly what the problem and the gripe is and how I think they've handled it wrongly, and I will be giving, my opinion on that there. 2,000 years ago, that was the promised land that we know in the Bible that the Israelis had, and they went to. Unfortunately, they didn't like it, and they went away into other places there. That, were the Arabs. So for 2,000 years, the Arabs occupied that country there. To all intents and purposes, legally, morally, and everything else, it is their country. Now, in 1948, because of the guilt, and I say this, and this will come out in the trial of Adolf Hitler, which we're filming, because of the guilt that both the United States of America and Britain had for not bombing the railway stations and the railway tracks that led for the Holocaust, they knew where those concentration camps were, and all they had to do was to bomb the railway lines, which they bombed loads anyway. But they missed I don't know whether it was purposefully or for whatever reason, they missed bombing those to stop. That would have stopped it dead. It would have slowed it down at least considerably, because the only way you can transport people to be killed is by railway during that time. And that's going to come out why they missed it. They knew about it. There's air reconnaissance about it. They just did not bomb the railway tracks. They didn't have to kill anyone else. They would have just bombed the railway tracks. The Germans would have taken 2-3 months to rebuild them, and so on and so on and so on. Because of the guilt that they had, all of a sudden in the Second World War, when that ended, we had a massive Jewish problem because they were all dispersed all over the place. Now, I'm sorry to say that I'm going to have to say this, and people might like it, might not like it. Britain didn't want them. America thought about housing them in Colorado, in one of the states there, but then they soon changed their mind. In other words, they all felt sorry for the Jews, but they didn't want the problem on their doorstep. So they come up with a solution. Well, let's give them back their land that they had 2,000 years ago. And in 1948, the United Nations, by a very small minority, they voted for Israel to have that land. And so that is the state of Israel. However, what do you do with people that are already there? All of a sudden, the house of Marcus Bozza is now the house of Giovanni Di Stefano. You're there, but I'm the boss. It's my land legally and everything there. So that's when you start with your problem there. The problem was created and caused by the guilt that America, and that is why the United States of America and England will back them, the Israelis, to the death. Whether they're right or wrong, they will back them, to the death there. And that is a major, major, major problem, that we have. After which, things got out of hand, because if you put a cat and a dog in a home together, they might get on okay for a while, but now and then they're opposing things. What Hamas want, they want which is what the PLO did not want. Yasser Arafat did not want that. The Hamas, where their problem lies, is that they want an Islamic state of Palestine, and that is a massive, massive problem to everybody. There. It was an internal problem also with Yasser Arafat. I discussed that with him at length before he died, or he was murdered, or whatever. But certainly, with him not around. Now, Hamas, both Rantisi and Yassin, they were opposed to any sort of recognition, any sort of peace. All Arafat wanted was peace. We can live together. We've done it before. The Egyptians lived with the Israelis, biblically. Yes, they were kept under serve, but they lived together. What I said to Yasser Arafat was that if you have a problem with Israel there, and you want to protest, and you want the world to protest and the world to be on your side, you don't need to kill people. You don't need to send bombs. You don't need to do any of that. All you need to do is to withdraw labor, because did you know that nearly 1 million of Palestinians enter Israel to do manual work there, without which, if you cut away all the domestics, all the that, you've brought that country to a standstill, and you'll make them understand. Now, what Israel also said in 1948, they said to Britain and to America, look, guys, thank you for giving us the land there, but we need protection. And the Americans and the British said, sorry, guys, we can't, that's something that we just simply cannot do. However, because your lot there have invented all sorts of, weapons, nuclear weapons and everything, we will allow you to build your army. We won't interrupt. We will fund you. We will do, but we cannot personally, like in Germany and in that, put bases there. So they allowed the Israelis to be heavily armed, to have nuclear capabilities there. Whether they will actually ever use them or not, we're going to see. I know Netanyahu very, very well. I don't think, he's the 5th time prime minister, 4th time. Yes. He's got criminal charges facing him. He may need my services at some stage.
Yes.
There, but that's the history behind it. They, the Israelis are living now. When Palestine said, well, let's have a little bit of our own land, at least let's call our own land. But the problem is that the connections, you have no connections. You have a bit of Palestine, then you have Israel, Palestine, Israel. So you have, and then we came across the thing called the corridors. We tried to have a solution to have it, but that didn't bloody work. When you talk about borders, the biggest problems that the Americans and the British had after the First World War in Africa and in the Middle East, they just drew straight lines on that. They didn't give a flying Ferrari who was on what side, whether they spoke the language, whether they were that. And that has been the problem. So now you understand the problem. What Hamas want is that they want an Islamic State of Palestine. And that simply, in my view, and I will make that crystal clear, at this stage is a step too far at this stage. It becomes an extremely dangerous situation. So I do understand, you know, the attitude of the United States. I understand they have to back them because they're the ones that caused the problem. Why didn't they take the, you know, the Israelis that were displaced, and there was, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands? Why didn't they just take them to? They took some to America just to show that they did, but they had a plan in 1963 even to evacuate Israel and take them to America, and that fell apart there. You know, when Kennedy was, you know, was killed there, and that would have been a solution there. But so long as you have the Israelis and Hamas, Hezbollah, who are more in Lebanon, that, I mean, so far they're keeping out of it there. But Hamas, remember, are religious fanatics. They are Islamic religious. Both, you know, Abdul Rantazi and Ahmed Yassin were imams. They were clerics. And there, Marcus, lies the foundation of your problem. So I do not want anyone calling me a racist. I don't want anyone saying that I'm anti, because I am not. I am very, very much for finding a solution that was created, a problem, by the United Kingdom and the United States of America.
Well, thank you for the background to the situation, Giovanni, from the Balfour Declaration in 1948 onwards. Anyone can look up that to get the historical context of that and who were the players involved in the formation of Israel. It is quite interesting, though, that there's a large Jewish population, a successful population in America that have a great say over Hollywood, for example. You sit behind.
Harvey Weinstein had a bad ending, didn't he? I mean, most of the key players, the bankers, are Jewish because, you know, for reasons that, you know, no one can seem to explain. You know, they seem to be able to get on with it. They stop moaning and groaning. The people who moan and groan about the Holocaust are not the Jews, are the others, because of the war guilt that they have. I'm telling you, Marcus.
Yes.
I'm telling your viewers and everything, the Holocaust could have been avoided had Britain and America bombed the railway tracks to the concentration camps. And we will show that in the trial of Adolf Hitler.
Right.
You will see the photographs, the aerial reconnaissance, and they did nothing.
And we look forward to seeing that. But for today's discussion, if it's okay, Giovanni, we're looking at Saturday just gone by, 5 days ago, the 7th of October. It was to many people's shock and surprise that the most patrolled and viewed cage, as it's called, the fence and the barrier between Israel and Palestine, all of a sudden this seemed to not work and go down. And the invasion or the attack, whatever you want to call it, the language from the mainstream press has obviously been one-sided. So it's Palestinians, it's bad, Israelis good. What were your thoughts when you saw this? Because this has been an ongoing situation for decades now. Do you think there's much more to this than actually meets the eye? Because it looks to be the narrative towards a greater conflict, which will involve Iran at some stage.
Well, if Iran enters the arena, who also have quasi-nuclear capability, they're on the verge of it if they haven't got it already. I think they probably do. Everybody's keeping quiet about it. There will be then serious, conflict. Yes. And only because of the Holocaust. Were it not for that, nobody would give a hoot. They do not want a repeat of history. But unfortunately, you know, the players and the dramatis personae in this and the stage has been set in 1948 by two countries for the wrong reasons there. Now we have to find a solution. You know, one thing is for certain, no one is going to accept an Islamic State of Palestine.
No.
Yasser Arafat didn't want it there, and you know, nobody yet, not per se yet. It's not the moment yet. And secondly, if there is to be, and it's about time that somewhere along the line, promises were made or not kept about having their own recognized country.
Yes.
Why in heaven's name can Palestine not be just Palestine again? You know, we start off with the Gaza, we start off that, and maybe even if there are no, maybe somewhere along the line, Israel will allow, you know, some of the land there, so you have connections. Once you have that, you'll find that the Palestinians won't have any issues whatsoever, because all they want is they want their own house back, which is not really unreasonable. How they've gone about it is unreasonable in my view there. And I will make my views as I've done with the IRA, with the UDF, that, and when I told them, if you kill people, every person you kill is one vote less.
That's right.
But remember also that Hamas is a political arm.
Yeah.
Now, as in most terrorist organizations, or those that are deemed terrorist organizations, Mandela's was for once, and he became president of the bloody country.
Well,
there. True. So Washington was a terrorist. He was wanted. He was a terrorist there. So what has to happen is some conciliation. There has to be some give and take. And in the meantime, there has to be an immediate cessation of any type of violence and warfare. Immediate meaning right this minute, before anything can go. Otherwise, it will just, I'll kill you, you'll kill me, then my brother, then my sister.
That's right. That's what Netanyahu has come out and said over the last couple of days, that he is really looking to obliterate Hamas. But then if he's going to obliterate Hamas, Giovanni, that means direct attacks on Palestine. Now, how does he then distinguish between men, women, and children and the Hamas terrorists? How can he possibly do that?
Well, how can you? That's always been the case with the IRA as well. And that when they had the Irish Free State, how can you distinguish who is part of an organization and who isn't there? The Ba'ath Party in Iraq was abolished, and that created a hell of a confusion in Iraq, because most of the Ba'ath Party members were just ordinary members who voted. They weren't terrorists. My grandfather, Giovanni Di Stefano, was one of the first people that subscribed to the Partito Nazionale Fascista. He was one of the first 1,000 fascists. So hell's bells. But he didn't kill anybody. He just went for a drink now and then, my grandmother said.
Well, anytime there's a regime change, we see it in Libya, we saw it in Iraq, and we've seen it in Afghanistan recently with the complete debacle that you saw with the withdrawal of troops, where they left $93 billion worth of weaponry. And many people are saying, Giovanni, that some of the weaponry that's been given to Ukraine, or that's been left in Afghanistan, has found its way over into the hands of Palestinian fighters.
Well, this is something that I said with Balkan News. One of the reasons why Arkan fell out with Mladic, General Mladic, because Mladic was retreating in the Bosnian area, and he was leaving arms and ammunition and tanks and everything there. He said, the hell's bells, that we can't, you're supposed to destroy those there. Now, as far as the effect on the Ukraine-Russia situation, this has been a massive distraction. All of a sudden, Zelensky and Putin have very little media, ping pong that, and that is causing a problem to both of them. And this is where, and I've been in Rome also and dealt, with the Russian element there. We are back in with a non-aggression agreement. That's very, very much now back on the cards, because they've noticed that they either continue with this tit-tat, tit-tat, tit-tat till 2026, until someone gets pissed off and presses a button, or, whatever, or they just call this, a day. But I'm telling you this right now, and I'll tell your viewers, there is no chance, absolutely zero chance of Putin giving back the Crimea or any lands that he's taken. That is an absolutely no-go. That is never going to happen, and it will never be forced into doing that. Maybe in 20 years' time, when he's long gone, there'll be a referendum as to whether they want to go back to Ukraine or whatever. but it's not going to happen as part of any peace. So that will definitely never happen. I can tell you that. The Russians, have told me that and made it crystal clear that is not on the cards.
Well, he would lose face completely if that happened. He would have no chance of staying in power, and he has got everything at his disposal. He's got the backing of the Chinese, seems to have the support of the Indians, most of the Middle East.
Well, that's
really
right. You've got three countries that are the most dangerous countries and the most powerful weaponry in the world. China, India, and Russia. And if they were all spitting together at the same time, they'd drown the rest of us.
That's right, because the American resources are well depleted. Many of the stock that they have in their weaponry has been given off to Ukrainians. As far as the Brits are concerned, many military experts said we would be lucky if we lasted 24 hours. We've got 2 aircraft carriers. One barely works.
One is not even working.
Well, that's right. It was built just down the road from where I live. The Queen Elizabeth. I saw her sail out under the Forth Road Bridge. It was a beautiful sight. But then she broke down a few miles down the road. I mean, it's
unbelievable.
Yeah, that is unbelievable.
It's completely misconceived situation, the United Kingdom. And that is why, because the Russians asked me yesterday, why have I kept Britain out of like my recommendations?
Sure.
They're a non-entity anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, James Cleverly, this is how clever this guy is. He's slagging off the Russians without realizing that even 100 years war ended it in less than 100 years. Yes. It's called the 100 Years' War, but it ended after 80. So what are you going to do with Russia once the war ends and everything gets back? Do you really think that they're going to let any of the British companies in when that idiot has slagged Russia off? He uses non-diplomatic language there, but then what do you expect, from a chancer? And I'm sorry to say that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Cleverly, but they showed footage of him running for cover when the alarms went off, and they were all holding their phones up, filming it. It looked very staged and very contrived to me. It turned out it was a flock of birds that they were running from. You couldn't make that up, could you?
None of that surprises me. I mean, like, were they feathered ones or ones with skirts? Because
well, I really don't know if they'd be running from a flock of those type of birds in mini skirts with lovely legs. You never know with the Conservatives. They could be up to any old thing. I don't want to talk about people with oranges in their mouths or tights over their heads, because you might know some of them.
Well, I know most of them there, but I know one thing, that this situation now in the Middle East it now needs a serious mediator who knows all the parties to be able to get that. This is a religious issue on one hand, because that's what they want. If someone said, to Ismail Haniyeh, we're going to let you have an Islamic State of Palestine, because Hamas is a political party. It's like Sinn Féin is the party for the IRA, but sometimes the political leaders cannot hold back the military arm. And it happened also with the ANC in South Africa. It's happened in Italy, very much so in Italy, in the 70s and 80s, what we call the Anni di Piombo, the bombing campaign in Italy there, all to achieve a political aim that they never will achieve. It's never going to happen. And I will tell, these people that it's never going to happen. This has to stop. Killing ordinary people will get you nowhere.
Absolutely. And there is no one calling for a ceasefire at all. Neither Joe Biden. Well, you are, but unfortunately for the rest of us, or fortunately, whatever way you look at it, you're not in a position like Joe Biden, or even His Royal Majesty. King Charles III came out today and he said he's backing Israel, and he decried the events from the Hamas point of view, calling them terrorists. Now that's something
he has to back Israel, because he does. His mob created the problem. Had they have bombed those railway tracks when they could have done, there would have been, hardly any. There would have been still people killed. They would have found another, but it would have been much, 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 much less. And that's what they have to, they had to cover that, because no one's ever considered that aspect there. You certainly, I don't know whether you ever thought of it. You didn't even know that they had, from 1942 onwards, they had aerial surveillance of trains going into Dachau, into Auschwitz, and into other places there. They could have bombed the train. And their excuse was, well, we didn't want to bomb the people. You didn't have to bomb the people, just bomb the train.
Well, Giovanni, the only way the Americans got into the war is because of Pearl Harbor. They stood down. They ignored the warnings. They allowed the base to happen, and that's what brought the Americans into the war.
That's right. There. Well, the Second World War is another issue, but Immediately after, that has been a major problem, by awarding people land that was not theirs for 2,000 years.
Sure.
Was a very dangerous move. And that had to, and of course, we started in 1967 with the first war, then the intifadas, and then because if I occupy your house, you and I might get on for a while, we might have to tolerate each other. But now and then when you get pissed off,
right,
you think back, why is this guy in my house? Let me give him a couple of slaps and see wagwan with that there. And that's the problem. That's the basic problem. People do not understand that. That's why I've kept it to a very basic level of explanation.
But let's expand on that a little if we have in the time that we've got remaining, because this is spilling over into Europe. Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, someone you are familiar with, is trying to put through a law to say that waving a Palestinian flag or draping a Palestinian flag anywhere is a hate crime. And she's trying to stop this. It's ideological differences. I mean, the UK has millions of Muslims living in it. Europe has millions of Muslims, and you won't find many backing Israel as requested by the government and the mainstream media, Giovanni.
I back Israel. I back Palestine. I back peace.
Yes.
You should not take sides. When your mum and dad used to argue, if ever you did, it would be wrong for you to back dad or mum, because you're going to need them at some stage, and they will make up again.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen. And, Arafat wanted to recognize Israel. I mean, this is Yasser Arafat to me in person in Belgrade when he came. I also flew to Tunis to meet him as well there from London. Incidentally, I flew to, with Abu Sharif, his right-hand man, with me there on the MGM jet. We flew from Heathrow, if you don't mind, from Heathrow to Tunis. And they paid our fuel as well.
Well, God bless them. Well, they're not short. Back then, they weren't short of a shekel or two.
I've got to tell you what. One thing was funny with Yasser Arafat there in his sort of compound. I didn't realize how dangerous the situation was, but every 30 minutes we had to move room from one room to the other. And after like 4 hours, when I went back to the hotel there, I said to my friend, who came with me, I said, what's that all about? He said, oh, in case that someone tries to bomb that, they wouldn't know which room that he's in. I thought, what a hell of a way to live that way. And he had a buzzer, Yasser.
Right.
So every time he wanted something, he'd press the buzzer and a man would come in Arabic or something there and say, and then the water would come. He did not have to do anything. He was so well served by people who loved him.
Yes.
And he referred to me as my brother. And my son Michael, who's written a book about me, not necessarily terribly complimentary, some of it there, has some of the correspondence there, because I showed it to him, and he couldn't believe that, that his dad is with people like like Yasser Arafat. But he was to my purpose, he was a nice guy.
You also have 2 chairs in your possession.
Oh, Saddam Hussein's chairs, yeah.
Now, do you still have them?
I do still have them. Yeah, I'll tell you what I'll do. Next time we have an interview, I'll bring them here and I'll put them up to the camera. Yeah, they were sent to me there many, many years ago. I also have lots of mementos from Iraq. I published recently the letter that Barzan al-Takriti sent, which I delivered to the United Nations in person there to stop an execution, which was one of the most horrific things that I had to witness. On the 17th of January, 2 people being killed.
Terrible.
And one of them, because he had spinal cancer, he was decapitated. I had to take his body, and take it to Tikrit on a military helicopter, and I was crying inside of me, not outside, because I didn't want them to show. And that still haunts me to this day, how that bloody thing was allowed. But the Americans did it.
Well, talking of terrible things like decapitations, there is a story going out, although it hasn't been 100% verified, of 40 children having their heads chopped off. Now, there are a lot of people, Giovanni, saying that this is absolute nonsense and it's not verifiable. And we've heard these stories before about incubators of children being tipped out. This was during the Gulf Wars. What are your thoughts when you hear stories like that?
Well, I've witnessed some terrible things in Serbia, in Bosnia. I've witnessed them in Libya. I've witnessed them also in Iraq. And they are terrible things that happen. War brings out the worst in humanity, which is why we as a country, and me personally, repudiate any form of violence and war. And it brings out things in people that are completely out of character. People that are normal people, they are out of character. I hope that that information is false, because
Yes.
if it isn't false there, then there has to be repercussions taken. There has to be, someone has to pay for that. That is a step too far. It's no good saying this is war and that. Children have got nothing to do with war. You know, but as I always remind people, war is about killing people. It's
Yes.
not about playing drafts or chess. You have to kill a person with a uniform. They put a uniform on and it makes them a legitimate target. What the United Nations have asked for are the rules of war. Even in war, there has to be rules of law, but
Sure.
they're always,
They're
breached
breached.
continuously.
They are breached. If we got about 5 minutes or so left, can I just, is that feasible?
Yeah, that's feasible. Yeah.
Okay. In the remaining time that we've got left with you, Giovanni, if we could just ask you, please, to look into your crystal ball and see how long this current conflict in Israel and Gaza and Palestine goes on for, and how does it get resolved?
It won't last much longer, because either there's going to be a settlement or that. But the first thing that has to happen is that everybody must request a cessation of violence. That's the most important thing. Once you have a cessation of violence and you go back to the status quo as it was, then you can decide what, if anything, can go there afterwards. If you continue this tit for tat and ping pong and that, there's going to be a lot more people dead, which doesn't do any harm, of course, to Netanyahu, or to the Hamas, because they, will be quite safe. It will be the average everyday person. And that's not what the intentions of Rantisi and Yassin were when they formed Hamas, which is effectively a religious organization.
Yes.
It is a religious, they were imams. They wanted to bring Islam into Palestine. That's what they wanted. They didn't want war with Israel. They just wanted to be able to that. But that was a step too far, and it is a step too far in my view there. It shouldn't last long. If everybody, if Biden, and even if you want to take sides, you take sides with Israel, but call for a cessation of activities. And what it requires is a mediator. It doesn't matter who the hell it is, someone to be able to talk to both sides, as what happened in the Falkland War.
Well,
it was General Haig that went to Buenos Aires.
It may well be
to
the
resolve something.
Chinese. It may well be the Chinese, Giovanni, because they
may well
did
be.
broker a deal. They did broker a deal a few months ago in the Middle East for peace, and they're very, obviously the Chinese are very close with the Saudis, and in turn their close relationship with the Saudis also gives them an insight into playing that role as peace broker.
Well, my advice would be to Hamas is to look at the Pope. The Pope is the only monarch, religious and administrative and diplomatic. It's the only in the world, the Vatican, that has a religious head at the same time as having a diplomatic head. So he is effectively king, and he's also the Pope, a religious that. Now, Saudi Arabia are close to that because they guard Mecca. But the Muslims do not have a leader. They do not have a Pope. They don't have any that. Yes. So if Hamas looked at how the Vatican have had to deal with stuff there, and it may well be that the Vatican may be the right people to choose, because that is the situation. They could easily have the similar situation in Palestine. They could have a Palestinian country there with a head of that country, and also be a religious head. Now, Iran did that also with the Ayatollah, not so much now, obviously, because the new Iranian leaders, are, they are clerics, but they have very little power there. So that is something that is very, very important. But the most important thing, cessation of all forms of violence and that. And I will be making it. You say that, I'm just me. Well, I have a hell of an insight and I know the players, all the players from both sides there. I don't take sides. We just want a situation where, first of all, you start with cessation of activities. Then you start looking at the new agreements, and you may have a new Oslo agreement. I don't know. Something has to be looked at. You have to look at the connections that you have a country that has connections and doesn't have gaps in. I mean, how the hell are you going to go from one? That's another
they're
area that
threatening. Netanyahu is threatening to cut off the power and the energy and the electricity.
That will just cause mayhem to the citizens.
It would actually be. It would be a war crime. It would be a war crime.
Well, it would be, but I mean, no one's going to bring him to book, you know, because as I said, his defense will be, well, you lot started it. You're the ones that created this problem. Did you know that in 1963, most of the Israelis actually wanted to go to America? They wanted a part of. They didn't actually even want to be there.
Yes,
they didn't want to be there, and there. But unfortunately, the Americans, they want to resolve the problem, but they don't want the problem on their doorstep. And that's what's it to me is a masquerade of hypocrisy, which is what Britain and America, and they're the ones that are responsible for this situation that should never have come to light. If they'd have wanted to resolve the situation, they should have taken that country into, even Italy would have hosted them. Even we've got space that, but you can't go in and steal people's land that has been there for 2,000 years, because 2,000 years and one ago, it was your land that you then left, you know, and went into the wilderness.
Well, that's what we're seeing, unfortunately, and you're seeing millions of Muslims all around the world actually using this as some sort of rallying point. And unfortunately, we've seen this on the streets of the UK, where it is spilling over.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, it is very unfortunate, but you have ideological opposition from the local people that live in the UK to those waving flags which seem to celebrate Hamas, which they have been told is a terrorist organization.
But it's a political party which they endorse, and they paid. I mean, the European Union, you know, paid them money to be able to hold the elections, and they won. I mean, you can't say we're going to have an election in England, but if Labour win, we're not going to accept it. I mean, that's crap.
This is from your good friends at the BBC. This is what these are from. Actually, the BBC have the BBC. Let's be fair, they haven't called them a terrorist organization, but everybody wants them to call them a terrorist organization. And when the king chimed in today, Giovanni, he actually called them Hamas a terrorist organization.
He's acting. Prince Charles is acting ultra vires.
King Charles III. Sorry.
That's right, the third. He's acting, and he's, you know, I mean, like, he needs to look at what happened to his ancestor, Charles I.
Yes, it's good advice.
That's right. So, you know, he should really keep out of this there completely. It's got nothing to do with him unless he steps down and becomes a private citizen like his great uncle did there. And then he can give a comment and call, you know, what the hell he wants there, but not as king. He should be reprimanded for interfering in diplomacy, because that is stoking the fire. And we don't need that. We don't need people like that. We certainly don't need that. And so that's what we need to push forward. If everybody who listens to this interview, you know, wants, you know, a cessation and rights, it doesn't matter whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, TikTok, whatever, the cessation of activities, and then come together to find out, you know, how we can resolve it. But the immediate problem now, we need to stem the blood flow. Whenever you have a gunshot wound, first thing you do as a medic, you stem the blood flow. Afterwards, then you sort things out. But first of all, you've got to stem the blood. And that's what needs to happen, Marcus. And that's coming from me, the devil's advocate.
Well, Giovanni Di Stefano, it's been a great pleasure to have you back onto Herd Immunity News. You're always welcome here. You have ongoing works at the moment as well, which probably most of my viewers would be quite interesting. Do you have a minute or two to tell us about those, or will I leave the links?
We've got Defending the Indefensible, which will be a Netflix that there, and that's a 6th season with me presenting just for 30 seconds, just presenting the clients that I've dealt, like Noriega, Saddam, Barzan al-Takrit, Awad al-Banda, and, you know, General Thanshwa, you know, all of those there, plus ordinary cases. Then we also have a brand new project.
Yes.
And this is an exclusive. Alfred Hitchcock Presents. You're too young to remember that. You don't remember
Good evening.
Well, you obviously you do.
I look like him.
We will have an Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Right.
Because I've written more than 200 different stories about other, not just client situations and that. And That went on for 316 episodes. It stopped in 1985. It was from 1960 to 9. So we were having a brand new Alfred Hitchcock Presents with me presenting, and then that there'll be a guest star for each one. Now, the reason that that's happened there is because CBS Reality, Virgin, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, HBO, they're short of product.
Yes.
They've exhausted their product. You know, I mean, you know, they're doing reruns and people are tired. They want new material. And who has the new material? And I have to thank Marcus Botzer for that, because you're the one that said you have a hell of a back catalogue, Giovanni. So I'm grateful to you. And we put that together, you know, and Caroline Bayford has done all of the brochures for that. I'm going to send them to you. They are terrific, absolutely terrific stuff that she's done there. And you'll be able to, you know, to see that there. We have the trial of Adolf Hitler. We have Lord Haw, and we have also the appeal of al-Megrahi there. We have wanted by Interpol. We have a whole heap of crime things. But what I did the other day was I reformed Corelco, Samuel Goldwyn, Eagle Star Films, MGM Pathé, amalgamated them together into a corporation in Delaware, and that went live today. So the first time a film company, 3 film companies and 3 music companies joined together, ready for our company to go public on the OTC.
That's amazing. It really is. And it's great that you're preserving all this for future generations to have a look at, because your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and youngsters all throughout the world will get to look at your body of work, the law, justice, history, and the human condition, all wrapped up in Giovanni Di Stefano.
And you know why that I'm able to do all of this?
Yes, sir.
Because I have no vendetta. I have no bitterness. What's happened to me has happened to me. It shouldn't have happened to me. But do I start crying all the time now over it to mama? No, because that's going to get me nowhere. If I thought that a single tear would get me somewhere, believe you me, you would be drowned in an ocean. I can do that. But it's not going to get me anywhere. And when you do, and this is to end this thing, when you do vendetta or vengeance, you need to dig a number of graves. But the first one is your own.
On that note, Mr. Giovanni Di Stefano, the devil's advocate, there is only one of him on this planet. There will only ever be one Giovanni Di Stefano like this man. Please check out his work and his links. Thank you very much, my dear friend, for coming back onto Herd Immunity News. And we wish you good health, every success, and we'll speak to you in the near future. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.